All right. Hello and welcome to Adobe InDesign, Design a Business Letterhead. My name is Caitlin and I'm a library instructor and research specialist at the Harrington location. And I will be assisted by my chat facilitator, Anna, who's also a library instructor and research specialist at the Haggard location. Please say hi, Anna.
Hello, everyone, and welcome.
So today, we will be covering how to set up and design dynamic business letterheads. This class is meant for intermediate users. However, all skill levels are welcome in this class. We will be using Adobe InDesign to lay out, format all business letterhead components and add premium printing effects. But there are some free alternatives such as Microsoft Word, Publisher, etc. if you do not have access to InDesign. Currently, all 5 of the Plano Public Library locations are offering access to Adobe Creative Cloud, so you can edit your business letterhead and other projects for free at any of those locations. Let's get started. So first and foremost, what is Adobe InDesign? It is an industry standard publishing application for print and digital media, and it is truly a page layout and formatting software. It's the meat and bread of the software world for layout. It's useful for creating flyers, books, magazines, newspapers, interactive PDFs, and more. So for letterheads, where to start? First, by identifying your business logo. So before we get started, you want to make sure that any logos, any colors, schemes, anything that you use consistently on print or digital media, you want to have that handy. Secondly, you want to think about how you're building a brand identity. All the pieces in your letterhead, any branding or media promotion that you're doing, you want to be consistent. This assists your business and promoting a consistent message, and it makes you much more professional on the marketplace. It's something that people can readily identify with your business. And thirdly, we are going to start thinking about how are you going to use your letterhead. Is it going to be for business promotion? Is it going to be strictly for communication efforts? You want to think about who your audience is and how you're going to use your letterhead when you get into the design. And I want to start by asking, are business letterheads still relevant in this digital age? I think they are. Letterheads are a great way to convey respect and engagement with your clients. Some best practices to think about are going to be your brand message. And part of that message is thinking about your audience. Who are you trying to attract and target in your communications? Letterhead can expand membership by having, again, that consistent message with your design. And letterheads can also attract partnerships because you're establishing a relevant communication structure. You're indicating that you are professional, that you have groundwork already built, you're established. So there's still a great usage for letterhead in today's business environment. And by setting up a consistent template for yourself, a letterhead that is consistent with all your other business promotions, you're going to assist yourself in consistently building upon your membership and your partnerships. So, business letterhead systems. Today we are going to focus strictly on the letterhead portion for formatting, but they are also known as stationery sets, but I personally view business letterhead systems as being different from stationery, as they are comprised. This is comprised of envelopes, business cards, and typically you have a consistent font and consistent color and style. Font especially is important to you want to think about having a consistent serif or sans serif font. Serif would be Times New Roman or Garamond, Georgia, anything that has a tail at the end of the letter. And sans serif is going to be a font type such as Arial or Century Gothic. And if you have any questions about logo creation or anything that goes into the message of creating a consistent graphic for your letterhead, feel free to refer to a previous class that Plano offered, Inkscape Logo Creation, and Anna was actually the instructor for that course. So feel free to ask her about the link to that class. Consistent color and style is important because, as you can see, all elements in this example to the right have consistent colors, but you can see that there's a camera there, and the black is really assisting that message for the professional aspect of the photography. And the two-color tone, the black and white image on the business card, all of these play a part of the message. So if your business has a consistent color scheme, swatches kind of used for your logos, definitely make sure that you're projecting the type of message you want with your colors and style of your branding. Is there any questions so far?
No questions so far. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. So, letterhead design components. So I do want to say before I list all of these, not everything listed here are required for your letterhead. These are things that you can include in other aspects of your business promotion. But if you do want to include these things, it's not going to hurt you either. It all depends on what style of communication you're wanting. But I will say that probably everything on this side of the list is what you're going to want to make sure you have on your letterhead. So you're going to want to make sure that in your letter, you have an individual's name. You want to state what your business or organization is. You want to have your business address because this is a letter, and all this contact information, which nowadays can include a phone number and website address. And it's not included here, but you may also want to include an email address. This class is not going into the content of letterhead. This is really focusing on the format, but these are aspects that you want to make sure that as you're formatting, you are including. Never miss an opportunity to proofread or double check yourself to make sure that everything is consistent or communicating everything effectively to your audience. I'm also going to briefly go over how to add certain premium printing effects. Depending on what your budget is, depending on who your audience is or how much you want to invest in these communication efforts for your company, you want to make sure you're communicating first with your printer, your printing service, to find out what they can do for you, how much these are going to cost, because you do want to make sure that if you're doing a premium printing effects, that it doesn't affect your budget for promotional material. And communication is going to be essential to having accurate design components correctly for printing. So you can always do unique shapes. You can do embossing, debossing, foil stamping. A matte or satin finish sometimes can be a paper type that you choose. So if you're going for a very traditional letterhead, you may have a higher paper weight with a matte finish or a satin finish. There's also glossy paper. Again, it depends on what message and who you're communicating with. But these are all details you want to think about when you're formatting your letter. For something more modern, you have QR codes. You could do a colored edge, mixed typography. I would say that mixed typography really makes more sense for your logo or a business card. I've seen it on some letterheads, but again, it depends on your branding and your current promotion identity that you have already built. Spot colors, which that's usually very, very typical for printers to offer, and interactive elements. That could be anything from using these in unique ways, or if you were trying to offer something like a recycle option for your letterhead once it's done, or if you're trying to make it multi-purpose or multifaceted. Any questions about this?
No questions yet.
Okay. Do feel free to ask any questions, or if I'm going too fast, I am more than happy to repeat. So I wanted to highlight some examples of some letterhead before we jumped into the InDesign software. So over here, you can see a letterhead that utilizes a lot of geometric shapes. And while it's used differently on all elements of the letterhead system, you can see it's still a consistent message. So on the business cards, you have smaller triangles in the same color scheme. And this is reflected on the top and bottom of the letterhead. And then on the, I would guess that this is a business folder. The business folder and the envelope reflect a more consistent, larger graphic. I would say that if they wanted to go larger on the letterhead, they probably could. They have enough space to make that a more dramatic graphic. But if you're not into how busy this can look, you can also have a more uniform style. Over here, it's a very simple color-based letterhead system. And again, for specific envelopes or larger colored graphics and such like that, just communicate with your printer or your office supplier. But the letterhead itself is very simple and uniform. And that's a very popular style, and it also can be cost effective. This one in the lower middle is a panda. So you can do more graphics specific to your brand. If you have something, this is called North Panda. If you have a very specific business genre that you're in, you can utilize graphics to quickly convey your message. And as you can see, the letterhead itself is black and white, and it has a small panda at the very top. It has consistent communications for contact information, and the body text is simply stated there as well. Some other examples, because again, you don't always have to have a top or bottom border. You don't have to have both in the corner. If your logo is very simple, like this one here for Pear Cafe, it's just a simple rectangle with the text inside. You can do very innovative designs still to highlight your message or your brand. They took images of pears along the top, and since that's such a highly colored, saturated image, they made that the top border and left the rest blank. Visually, that is very appealing, and it makes it easy for your audience to read. It also quickly conveys the message that, oh, pears, Pear Cafe. So again, everything that we're looking at today, it's about your output, your communication efforts to quickly convey your message. And then over here, this is what I would say more of a standard, a very basic iteration of letterhead. So it's kind of this geometric graphics. It's not quite as detailed as the first one I showed you, but it still does the job. So if you're worried that you don't have a lot of graphic design skills, or you don't have a developed logo or color system yet, you can still keep it very simple. You don't have to go very huge on graphics or colors. You just want to make sure that you are consistent in your logo usage and you're consistent in your communication efforts. All right. Any questions about letterhead examples or types?
Not at this time.
Okie doke. Then before we switch over to the InDesign software, I do want to highlight these 3 tools. You will see me use most often the black arrow selection tool. The keyboard is V, and to get out of that is escape. Or if you're in another tool such as the type tool, you can hit escape and revert back to the selection tool. And lastly, I use the rectangle frame tool for a lot of my file place. It helps me mock up pages to move elements or preview where I would use elements on a page. Okay, I'm going to open up InDesign. If you yourself have InDesign at home, feel free to follow along. I don't have exercise files, but it never hurts to try things out or ask questions as you have them come up.
Caitlin, we do have a question actually.
Awesome.
Can we print any kind of letterhead examples on our home printer?
Yes, because letterhead are going to most likely utilize a standard letter size piece of paper. And if you're in Europe, that would be an A4 style paper. So unless you're going for something more unique, like a legal size or anything like that, absolutely. I don't see any reason why you couldn't print it at home. The only other thing I could think of is if you're wanting to have graphics go all the way to the edge of your paper, which utilizes a bleed effect. I can go into that in the file creation as we set up our page. That's the only case where you wouldn't be able to get that graphic all the way to the edge, because bleed, in fact, is something for a professional printing service where they print the image on a larger size of paper and they cut it down to the standard size so you get that image all the way to the edge. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. It's a good question, because you always have to think with everything that you're doing with print resources, who is your audience and how is what I'm designing online going to print? Think about your output. That's my 100%, like, you will hear me say that all the time. Always think about your output. So this is the create new screen in InDesign. And if you don't see it when you first open your page, I'm going to show what that looks like. So when you open the software, it generally will look like this. If you have a document already saved, you can click open, you can click create new for a new document, or you can go all the way up here to file, new document. New document should open this new screen. You should see at the top print web mobile. What we're doing is print based. And you can see already in the preset, there is a letter size. That is what we are going to use. However, I personally am not familiar enough to remember the equivalent of picas or point conversion to inches or millimeters or any metric measurement. So I switch it to inches because that's what I'm comfortable with. Now we are going to turn off facing pages. So we're going to uncheck that because facing pages is typically used for any multi-page bound document that you may be working on. So a magazine or book, typically. A letterhead is typically only one page, though you can have multiple pages. I would never go longer than 3. Again, you have to think about your envelope and the weight of paper you're using and how thick is that going to be. Also, people typically have the have attention span for just a short letter, unless it's something they're really interested in or needing the pertinent information. We're not going to worry about columns or column gutter because this is a letter. What we are focused on is this margins and the bleed and slug down here. So right now you can see that this kind of chain link icon is selected. And if I were to adjust any of the margins, they would all change at the same measurement. However, for a letterhead, we don't have a standard margin that we would on a normal page. We're not going to have equivalent margins because you need room for your graphics and your header and footer. So we're going to unselect that. So it should look like a broken link now. And for our top margins, we're going to increase that to 2.25. So 2 inches and a quarter. And you can do that by selecting the up arrow, or you can simply type it in. So I have the top margin that I want. The bottom margin, I'm actually going to increase to 1 inch. And my left and right, this can vary depending on what style of a letterhead you're creating. Most universities will have on either side a 0.75 margin and increase the other side to anywhere from 1 inch to 1 inch and a quarter because they have other logos or graphic design elements that go down on the left or right hand side of the page. Now for me, I think today we're just going to stick to a consistent 1 inch on either side. And I have the preview element, so you can also check and see what that looks like if you're ever concerned that you're not leaving enough room for elements you want on your letterhead. But also bleed and slug. So bleed is the element I mentioned earlier that's important if you're going to go with a professional printer. And another option, if you're still wanting to print the actual letter off of a home or office printer, is that you could design a letterhead but leave it blank for just your text element and order pre-logo, pre-graphics only paper printed and just have that in your printer. That way you don't have to worry about the graphics. So that would be another way to still have graphics go all the way to the edge, which is what your bleed will do, but still have the capability to manage your own communication efforts. I hope that makes sense. So for this example, we're going to go ahead and increase it to about a quarter, just because I think I'll mess with some designs that go all the way to the edge for this example. And then slug is actually creating a specific space in your InDesign document for printer communication. So it's a registration mark that allows you to specifically say, hey, this element or this color on the design is actually a spot color effect, or please pay attention to this. I want my margins to be this specifically. So any communication you have with your printer, you can create this extra space to have that communication there. And if you're working with a printer service, I would recommend always having some sort of instruction or communication for their reference, because typically printing services will have designers in-house to verify designs. So if they're looking at a graphic that you have that goes all the way to the edge, but you didn't indicate a bleed, having a registration mark indicating, yes, I want this graphic all the way to the edge, will allow them to either fix that for you or will allow them to reach out and confirm that detail so that they can add it in. Does that make sense? Any questions so far about page creation? setting up your document?
You're doing a marvelous job of explaining everything. Everything makes sense. There are no questions so far.
Okay. Well, I love questions, so please don't hesitate. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create this, and actually I don't want all this the same. I'm gonna make the left-hand side where I have this. So I'm going to change that to 0 and change that to 0. And for the left, I'm just going to increase that to a 5-inch. And to make sure that I like that, just drag that open and you can see, so the bleed is indicated in a red line outside of the page. So when they print the graphic, it'll actually print on a page size, that quarter size larger, and then they would cut it down to size. That's what InDesign does really well, is communicating what needs to be done to get the desired output. And then this blue line to the left is where I've indicated printer instructions with the slug. So it is not a printing mark, but it's a designated area where you can take a text box using this text tool over here to indicate what specifically needs to be done with your document. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and say create. And woohoo! If this is the first time that you had Adobe InDesign opened, this would pop up. We don't need a quick tour, so we're going to exit. And before we jump into placing elements or really looking at specifics, I'm going to change up my workspace a little bit. When you open InDesign, it's going to default to Essentials. So this is your switcher at the top. All of your tools are over here on the left, and all your panels are over on the right. Now, I personally have used Microsoft Word my entire life, and I'm much more comfortable viewing all of this information at the top of my page in a ribbon. So you can change that and adjust it by going back to Essentials Classic. So as you can see, my workspace has changed. Now we don't need Creative Cloud libraries. That's not something we're using today. So I can close that, and actually I can drag that under to give myself an easier to view workspace. And all my panels are here, but I control how they open. And then I have my top ribbon here, which changes according to the tool. So by selecting my type tool, you can see I now have font. I have paragraph styles by selecting the paragraph formatting controls. And for me, it's just a lot easier to view. Now, something I'll mention briefly is that if you are working on any other type of project, InDesign does have preset workspaces for those projects. Excuse me. So if you're working on a book, you could select this and it would change everything in your workspace to be geared towards that. Now, if you're looking for a specific panel or tool that's not on your panel, you can go up here to Window, and this has literally everything that you could need here. So if I wanted to make sure I had consistent paragraph styles, by opening that, it opens that panel that I would need as a separate window. Now, personally, I don't like the pop-ups, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag it over here to the right to my panels and add it to that view. All right, so you can see I've got my layout, my workspace, everything's looking pretty good. So we can start adding in our graphics and our body text. Now, as I said at the beginning, we do not need to worry about the content of your letter. In this class, I'm focusing strictly on the formatting. So I'm going to switch from the text tool to my rectangle frame tool, and I'm going to kind of mock up my letterhead template. So at the top, I'm going to do a border very similar to the Pear Cafe that we saw earlier. So this just kind of gives me a good idea of where I place things. It also can be used for placing items. Now the margins does a good job of indicating, okay, my body text is going here. But if I wanted to add in elements specifically under for like a footer, then I can use the box just to mock up how it would look, if it looks too top heavy, if I want to use something lighter, or have other details at the bottom. So InDesign does really, really awesome things, such as popping up with guidelines. I hope as I create boxes, you can see there's these green lines popping up, and it indicates if things are aligned at the top, bottom, or centered. Right now you can see it's centered with what I'm dragging, but I'm doing a very, very poor job at having things be a consistent size. But there's an easy way to fix that, because you can go back to your black arrow tool and adjust. What you don't want to do is try and adjust the size of that while you're still in the rectangle frame tool, because look, I'm still stuck in it. I can't adjust it. All I will do is create more boxes. Since that's not what I want to do, I will switch back to the black arrow tool, the selection tool, and I'm going to delete those unwanted boxes. Also, since I don't necessarily want to adjust manually, which I can do and have the green arrow pop up and have everything aligned beautifully, what I can do is simply delete those extra boxes. And I think I've decided I like the middle size the best. I'm going to copy, so Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac, Control V, and then I can click and drag down and either use the green arrows, or I can go up to Window, and there is another fun panel you can open called Align. This is probably one of my favorite panels, and I actually want the entire family, so I'll click the top and not the specific panel, add it over here, and just by shift clicking and selecting everything, you can adjust the center, and then you can use your arrows on your keyboard to adjust as necessary, or you can still select all three and find that center by dragging that. Again, I love InDesign, it's formatting based, so you can actually find the vertical and horizontal center just by dragging it. InDesign will indicate it with that purple or pinkish line that pops up. So if I wanted to find the very center of the page, again, I've got it vertically centered, but I want to find that horizontal, and there it is. That if I wanted content in the middle, that's how I would find it. Now, since that's not what I want, I just want the vertical center. I will drag like so. But again, if I didn't want to drag, you can change that by changing your Align to settings to page and just changing it to horizontal center. The thing to remember when you have multiple items selected is that if you do this setting right here, it will put all of them in the center. So I'm going to Control Z to undo, or Command Z to undo. And for me, I just prefer to drag. It's a lot faster and doesn't have the easy mistake. But if you just have one item, it's very easy to select what you want to align it to. So if I had an element that I just wanted to have in line with the printing margins, then I could align it that way. These are just some fun useful tips and tricks to speed up your formatting process. InDesign is a lot of rinse and repeat, switching from one tool to the next, and just keeping in mind what your end goal is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and place a graphic in this top box. And that can be done by doing either File, Place, or you can use the keyboard shortcut of Control-D or Command-D. So for this example, I'm taking direct inspiration from the Pear Cafe, and I'm going to import, oh, wrong folder, letterhead images, a bunch of strawberries. But as you can see, that's just one giant strawberry, which doesn't bother me, but it's also pixelated. So ways to fix that: right click and go to fitting. And you can do fit content proportionally, which as you can see takes the entire image and simply fits it. Or what I'm going to use for this is fill frame proportionally. And it gives me a very nice background at the top. As you can see, this is also a very saturated color, saturated photo. So I don't necessarily want to have a lot of graphics on the side or below. I think Pear Cafe had a good point in only using it for a top ribbon. So fitting is a really great tool for your images. If you ever wanted to specifically fill a shape, so for instance, you can go over here to the rectangle frame tool, and if you hold it, you can have an ellipse frame tool or a polygon frame tool. So just for fun, we're going to do the ellipse and say that we wanted something in the lower corner. You could have strictly just that portion of the circle filled. We'll go ahead and play with the strawberry again. So Control-D, add that in, right click, fitting, and fill frame proportionally. But let's say I actually wanted a larger strawberry. What I could do is actually go back. Content aware. I actually like that better. And if you were to switch your view to a preview, that's what they would see. However, again, highly color saturated graphics, I'm going to delete that because I think there's actually too much going on. I think that top border is actually pretty big. So I may go back to my black arrow and adjust it height-wise to a little less. And then if you don't like the placement of strawberries or your graphic, you can hover over that center and raise it till you kind of get the quotient that you like. That's where I would then switch to normal and adjust. So what I'm really getting is that top inch or so of the graphic. And you can also see when you go to preview, you're not getting the full edge of your graphic. You're only getting what you have on the specified page size. So that is, again, that's what a bleed does for you. And I'm actually going to lower it again because I think I like that better. Okay. I would recommend that you type up all of your letterhead body text, the actual letter itself, in a software like Microsoft Word first. InDesign is a very, very robust software, but it is not a word processor. It can do basic spelling check, but in terms of grammar, you're not going to get the same level of proofreading as you will in a software like Word. And you can, in fact, file and place your letter with the preserved formatting into InDesign. You would still do the same file, place, or Control D to add in your body text. First and foremost, though, you would want to make sure that you use the type tool and select pretty much all the space in your margins, and that allows you to have your text. Because I really don't want to focus on the text in this, I'm just going to type business name, business address, one, business address, which would be even better if I could type and spell things correctly, 2, and dear sir, madam, and I'm going to now make use of there's a, oh, there it was, fill with placeholder text. So if you're just wanting to test out a design, you can mock up what you need, go to type, and fill with placeholder text. That way you still get the visual of filling in your content without having to change all your design elements. So that is what I'm going to use, and I'm going to actually delete a portion of it to actually have our conclusion. So again, this is where we can get into having that consistent font and elements. So if you have a font that you use for your business, you can actually go ahead and create a character style, and you can create a new style. And if you double click it, it should open another window for options. And you can name this body text. You can create a specific font for headers, for footers, if you're going to have consistent size, or color options even. So over here, we have our name. We're not going to base this on anything. We're going to go here to format. And this is where we can choose a font family. So again, what I mentioned earlier with serif and sans serif, this is where it you can have some fun with your material by choosing a font that will be exclusive for your brand identity. I find that serif font works very well for traditional elements, sans serif for more modern. So think about the business image that you're trying to project and choose a font accordingly. So because that image at the very top is so color saturated, I'm going to choose a sans serif font. I'm going to go with Century Gothic, which we use in a library for headers, and typically we'll use a different font for the body text, but I think Century Gothic is a very nice font. It's a larger size, so if I'm thinking about the readability of my audience, I can then choose a font that I know will print larger, that'll be easier to be read. So again, that's just a consideration when you're setting your character styles options when you're adjusting everything as necessary. Because again, everything in InDesign, all about your output. And we just need a regular output. Our advanced, we don't need anything advanced. We want to keep it black. And we don't have to worry about any of these either. Okay. So that's a good character style. And then we can actually apply a basic paragraph and adjust it and double click, same way. And we're going to base it off of a basic character format. It's already preset to Century Gothic, and 12-point font is probably great. Again, you shouldn't have to mess with this too much unless you're looking to do something specific, or unless you have something very specific with your formatting. However, again, if you are importing from Microsoft Word, it should preserve most of your actual formatting, and you should really only have to worry about your font in InDesign. Okay. So I am okay with that. And then we are actually going to do Control A to highlight that, and we're going to change it to paragraph style body text, and everything is consistent. And you can apply that for every other element. You can create new paragraph body styles if necessary. If on this letterhead you wanted to have a signature applied, you could save your signature. I know Adobe Acrobat allows the signing feature, so you could even add that afterwards and not in InDesign if you wanted. It all depends on what your setup is going to be. Now, if we're going to have a logo, I'm going to do something very simple here just to create it quickly, but if you had a specific logo, you could also import it on top. So for instance, I'm taking direct inspiration from the Pear Cafe example, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to paper. And I'm going to shift and draw. Black arrow and draw. Oh, whoops. Selected the wrong thing. Control Z. Make sure I have that selected, and I'm actually going to go to align and center. I'm going to go back up to stroke now and increase the weight there. Change that to white. And I'm going to type here. Something like strawberry paradise. And we'll see if I actually spelled anything correctly. We're going to go ahead and adjust it manually. Century Gothic, we're going to go for bold, and we're going to increase Of course, we can't read anything. We're going to change the fill to paper. And as you can see, there's a red plus sign that has appeared. Anytime you have overset text, so for instance, if you, in your body text, your letter, have a much longer letter than you thought, and it appeared longer with your font and size choice, pay attention to that red plus sign so you can adjust your content as necessary. If we had another page, that's where I would say click the plus sign and place it on the other page. But we're going for just one page here. So instead, I'll click the black arrow and I will simply adjust the size to accommodate it. As you can see, I said strawberry paradises instead of paradise. So I'll delete that and I will actually just delete so I get the same font size without having to adjust. Now, I don't like the left side orientation, so I can either do Control-C for center, or I can go up here to the paragraph style and just change that like so. Now, whenever I click off, you can see now I have some sort of logo at the top. Again, this is just a very brief example. If you are interested in viewing more about logos for your business, do take a look at Anna's logo creation class. It is available on YouTube. And before I go too much further, I'm going to preview this, and I can see now that this is very close to the top of my page, and I want to make sure that this doesn't print so close to the edge, so I can lower it. Again, I'm adjusting with my keyboard. I prefer to adjust with my keyboard because I feel like for micro adjustments, you get something much more precise than just dragging. All right, so that looks pretty good. And then that's where for this, I may actually use this space to put contact information like phone numbers, email addresses, website addresses. And I could add like a graphic element, like a line over here from the tools in between. To get a quick straight line, all you have to do is hold down Shift and click, and you will get a straight line. And then for consistency, I would never try to replicate the same size for lines. It's hard. Just Control-C, Control-V, and switch to your black arrow tool or escape, or use your keyboard to adjust. Sometimes it's very hard when you have multiple content layering on each other to select what you're trying to click if it's thin. But then for consistent alignment, Shift and click, go to your line panel, and oops, took it to the center of the page, but it is aligned straight. I forgot that my selection is aligned to page rather than aligned to selection. So I'm actually going to Control-Z, and that's where I would try that again. And now it doesn't move to the top, the center of the page. It only aligned for the selection. Clicking off, and you can see it's nice and organized. So I have 5 minutes left for this class. Are there any questions over what we've gone over, or anything you'd like to see me do within the software before we end?
There are no questions so far.
Okay, well, we do have 5 minutes. So if you think of anything, feel free to type it into the chat box. There's a lot you can do with letterheads. This is simply an example of one. If I were to, I'm going to go ahead and just create in this document another page with the same settings. You can adjust your margins at any time by going up to File and Document Presets or Document Setup, and you can adjust your margins. So if you wanted more on one side than the other, or if you wanted to have more graphics on the bottom of your page rather than the bottom, or graphics on both, top and bottom, you could even increase the margins. Again, it all depends on your message. So as you can see, it adjusted very quickly. Just to show some different graphic types, I have some examples created by Anna that I can play around with. Also, if your graphics are ever still pixelated when you import them, do feel free to go to display performance and change that to high quality display. It should fix most issues. With a lighter graphic at the top, you could even put your contact information at the top of the page rather than at the bottom. All of this is really in accordance to whatever graphic you have, whatever is your consistent element. So because this has blue and black primarily, if I were to create like a swatch panel specific to this, I would take the eyedropper tool, color theme tool over here, select that, and I would actually click on this graphic. And as you can see, it actually creates a swatch panel for myself. And I would actually go ahead and add this theme to my swatches. However, again, hold shift or make sure that whatever color it is, you're getting exactly what you want. So this is colorful, bright, dark, muted. It has options from that. You can save it to your Creative Cloud library, okay? And then you can actually load it to your swatches panel by going here to hamburger, load swatches. So you can even save it as its own thing and add in. If you have another file that has your swatches saved in it, you can load it that way. You can name a new color group that way. You can also apply it directly from your Creative Cloud library, which this is a part of your Adobe CC subscription if you have it. So it's very easy to find and apply things from here. You can also, well, normally clicking and dragging works, or you can simply add it by clicking the plus sign here. There's no one way to do anything in InDesign. I can't stress that enough. There's a million different ways to accomplish what you're trying to do. I know it can be very daunting at first, but I hope that this class has assisted you in navigating InDesign and using it for your business. Anything else before we end today?
No, I think you did a great job. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all for attending. Please stay tuned for more classes from the Plano Public Library.